For 15 years he ran in the same park, at the same time. No matter the weather, no matter the season. A reliable, quiet, respected man. That morning, when the young soldier greeted him, the old man responded with a military salute. And at that moment, everything changed. Welcome to Human Stories. Before we begin this powerful story of discipline, leadership, and hidden heroism, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from today, and if you believe stories like this need to be heard. Hit that subscribe button and help us keep these stories alive. William Bill Harrison, 65 years old, tall, silver, started his run in Central Park. Every morning at exactly 5:30 a.m., it was a routine he hadn't missed for 15 years. Rain or snow, sickness or fatigue, he was always there. His running style was distinctive, not slow and cautious like most elderly runners, but disciplined and powerful. Regular steps, controlled breathing, perfect posture. He moved as if he were 40 years younger. The early morning park was his sanctuary. When the city still slept, when the air was crisp and clean, when only the most dedicated runners shared the pathways. Bill knew every tree, every bench, every turn of the route. This wasn't just exercise for him, it was meditation, discipline, and purpose rolled into one daily ritual. Regular park visitors knew him. They called him Uncle Bill. Kind, quiet, greeting everyone but not talking much. Most people assumed he was a retired teacher or civil servant, someone who had lived a quiet, unremarkable life and found peace in routine. Bill's running route was always the same, starting from the north entrance, turning east on the main path, completing a full circle around the lake, then climbing the south hill and returning to the starting point. Total, 5 kilometers, 35 minutes. Never faster, never slower. The precision was almost military. After running, he would do 15 minutes of stretching. Same corner, same exercises, same order. Push-ups, planks, pull-ups on the exercise bars. His form was perfect, his count precise, then he'd get a black coffee from the cafe at the park exit and head home. Simple, orderly, predictable life. But there were overlooked details in Bill's routine. While running, he constantly scanned his surroundings. He noticed newcomers, detected unusual situations, memorized faces and patterns. His eyes were those of someone trained to observe, to assess, to protect. As if he were an invisible guardian, watching over the park and its people. Other runners sometimes tried to keep up with him, but few could maintain his pace for the full route. They'd start strong but gradually fall behind. Amazed at how this 65-year-old man could maintain such stamina and form. When asked about his secret, Bill would simply smile and say, consistency and discipline. What they didn't know was that Bill's discipline had been forged in places far more challenging than Central Park, in deserts and jungles. Under enemy fire, carrying wounded comrades, his morning runs weren't just about fitness, they were about maintaining the readiness that had kept him alive for 3 decades of military service. On that cold March morning, Bill had started his run as usual. The park was quieter than normal. The harsh winter had kept many casual runners away. But Bill never let weather dictate his schedule. If anything, the challenging conditions reminded him of training exercises from decades past. That day, there was a new face in the park. A 28-year-old man with an athletic build, short hair, and unmistakable military bearing. Even in civilian running gear, his posture and movement patterns screamed military training. The young man was also running, but studying Bill's route with obvious interest. At first it seemed coincidental, but Bill's trained instincts told him this was intentional. After 30 years in special operations, he could spot surveillance from a mile away. On the second lap, the young man adjusted his pace to match Bill's. Professional curiosity overrode caution. Not many people could maintain Bill's rhythm, especially not someone 40 years younger, making it look effortless. On the third lap, the young man made his move. Good morning, sir. I'm Marcus Thompson, Lieutenant Marcus Thompson. Bill slowed to a stop and turned to face him. Clean-shaven, respectful stance, eyes that had seen action. A soldier, not a weekend warrior. Good morning. I'm Bill Harrison. I admire your running discipline, sir. I heard you're here every day at 5:30. Bill studied the young man carefully. For 15 years, you're new to the park. Yes, sir. I'm stationed at Fort Hamilton, deploying soon. Working on conditioning. Marcus paused, choosing his words carefully. Would it be okay if I joined your route sometimes? I could use the challenge. There was something in Marcus's tone, not just respect, but recognition. As if he sensed something familiar in Bill's bearing. Of course, but why my route specifically? Marcus hesitated for a moment. Because I can tell you know what you're doing, sir. Your form, your pace, your awareness. It's not civilian. This observation impressed Bill. Most people saw an old man jogging. This young officer saw training patterns, tactical awareness, military discipline. Someone had taught Marcus to recognize these things. You're quite observant, Lieutenant. It's part of my training. Sir, Special Forces, we're taught to notice details. Bill's interest sharpened considerably. Special Forces soldiers weren't ordinary military personnel. They were elite, highly trained, carefully selected. If this young man was studying him, there might be more to this encounter than coincidence. Which unit? 75th Ranger Regiment. Sir, you seem familiar with military structure. Bill smiled but didn't answer directly. Instead, he began running again, setting a pace that would test the young ranger's conditioning. For the next 20 minutes, they ran in compatible silence. Marcus kept up easily, his breathing controlled, his form excellent. Whatever unit had trained him had done it well. As they finished the route, Marcus ventured another question. Sir, if you don't mind me asking, your conditioning and discipline suggest military background. Were you ever in service? Bill stopped stretching and looked at Marcus seriously. It was the question he'd been expecting. Why is that important to you, Lieutenant? Because if you were, I'd like to know who I have the honor of running with. The respect in Marcus's voice was genuine, not curiosity or hero worship, but the kind of professional respect one soldier shows another. After a long pause, Bill spoke quietly. Colonel William Harrison, U.S. Army Rangers. Retired, 2008. Marcus immediately came to attention and delivered a crisp military salute. Sir, it's an honor. Bill returned the salute with the same precision he'd maintained for 3 decades, and, at that moment, everything changed. The salute lasted only seconds, but its impact transformed their relationship completely. Marcus wasn't just meeting a fellow veteran, he was standing before a legend. Sir, 75th Rangers is my unit. Your name? I've heard it in briefings. Bill was surprised. He'd been retired for 15 years, living quietly, assuming his military career had faded into institutional memory. What briefings? Tactical innovation seminars. Sir, urban warfare doctrine, night infiltration techniques. They still teach your methods at Ranger School. Each mention brought back memories for Bill. Operations he'd led, tactics he'd developed, young soldiers he'd trained. It seemed strange that his work was still relevant to a new generation. Which operations do you know about? The night infiltration, in Baghdad, 2004. Urban warfare, innovations in Fallujah. The hostage rescue operation in Kabul, 2006. Marcus paused. The one where you extracted 12 civilians from a compound surrounded by hostiles. That last operation hit Bill hard. 12 lives saved, but 3 good soldiers lost. A success in tactical terms, a tragedy in human ones. How do you know these details? Because they're part of our training curriculum, sir. Your tactical innovations saved hundreds of lives. The Harrison Protocol for urban rescue operations is still standard doctrine. Bill felt a mix of pride and melancholy. Pride that his work had lasting value. Melancholy for the cost of learning those lessons. Marcus, those weren't just tactical moves, they were desperate decisions made by desperate men in desperate situations. That's what made them brilliant, sir. Real leadership under pressure, making impossible decisions when lives hung in the balance. Over the following days, Marcus joined Bill's morning runs regularly. What had started as a chance encounter evolved into something much deeper, a bridge between military generations, a transfer of hard-earned wisdom. 3 days later, Marcus arrived with questions that went beyond physical conditioning. Sir, would you be willing to share some of your experience? Not classified information, just leadership principles. How to make decisions under pressure. Bill had been living quietly for 15 years, deliberately avoiding the spotlight. But looking at this earnest young officer, someone about to face the same challenges he'd once faced, he felt the old sense of responsibility stirring. What specifically do you want to know? How to lead soldiers in impossible situations. How to make life or death decisions when there's no good answer. How to bring everyone home. That last phrase resonated deeply. Every military leader's ultimate goal, the burden that never left, even in retirement. All right, but this stays between us. From that morning forward, their runs became informal leadership seminars. Bill shared hard-earned lessons while Marcus absorbed every word. Leadership isn't about rank, Marcus, it's about taking responsibility when no one else will. How do you handle fear? Sir, you don't eliminate fear. You use it. Fear keeps you alert, keeps you alive. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's action despite fear. What about impossible decisions? Bill slowed to a walk, his expression serious. In combat, you rarely have perfect information or unlimited time. You make the best decision you can with what you know, and you live with the consequences. The key is accepting that some decisions will be wrong, and learning from them. These conversations became precious to both men. Bill felt useful again, his experience valued rather than forgotten. Marcus gained insights no classroom could provide, real wisdom from someone who'd faced the ultimate tests of leadership. As their relationship deepened, Bill began sharing more specific experiences. Sir, how do you deal with casualties? Losing people under your command? This question struck at Bill's deepest wounds. Even 15 years later, he carried the names and faces of every soldier he'd lost. You honor them by learning from their sacrifice. You carry their memory forward by being better, by saving the next person who needs saving. But how do you live with the guilt? You don't live with it, Marcus. You live through it. Guilt is a luxury leaders can't afford. Your job is to keep the living alive, not to mourn the dead. That comes later. In quiet moments like these, Bill talked about the responsibility of command, the weight of making decisions that affected other people's lives. In special operations, you're often isolated from command structure. You have to make critical decisions with incomplete information. The key is trusting your training, trusting your team, and accepting that perfection is impossible. What about moral complexity, sir? When missions conflict with conscience, that's the hardest part. Marcus, sometimes you follow orders you disagree with. Sometimes you disobey orders you think are wrong. Wisdom is knowing the difference. Experience is living with the consequences either way. These discussions revealed Bill's philosophy of leadership: pragmatic, honest, deeply moral, but not naive about the realities of combat. 3 weeks into their morning routine, Marcus arrived with news that changed everything. Sir, I deploy in 48 hours. Afghanistan. Rescue operation. Bill felt the familiar knot in his stomach. Another young soldier heading into harm's way, carrying responsibilities that would test everything he'd been taught. Tell me what you can. About the mission: high-value target extraction. Compound in hostile territory. Multiple civilians at risk. Limited air support. Bill recognized the scenario immediately. The kind of operation he'd run dozens of times, where success meant everyone coming home and failure meant body bags. Marcus, listen carefully. In rescue operations, speed saves lives, but patience saves soldiers. Don't sacrifice caution for urgency. Yes, sir. Remember the principles we discussed. Trust your training, trust your team. Make decisions based on what you know, not what you fear. How do you prepare mentally for operations like this? Bill considered the question carefully. You accept that you might not come home. Once you make peace with that, you can focus entirely on bringing your team and the civilians back safely. That's terrifying, sir. Good. If it doesn't scare you, you don't understand the stakes. Fear will keep you alive if you let it sharpen your focus instead of paralyzing your judgment. They spent Marcus's last morning going over tactical scenarios, leadership challenges, and mental preparation techniques. Bill shared insights that couldn't be found in any manual lessons written in blood and carved into memory. While Marcus was deployed, Bill resumed his solitary morning routine. But the park felt different now, less meditative, more purposeful. He found himself thinking about the young ranger, wondering if the lessons they'd shared were proving useful. 6 weeks into the deployment, a letter arrived, not through official channels, but through a mutual contact at Fort Hamilton. Sir, your advice about patience and precision saved my team yesterday. We were preparing to assault a compound when your voice echoed in my head. Speed saves lives, but patience saves soldiers. We waited, observed, and discovered a secondary exit the intelligence had missed. What could have been a bloodbath became a clean extraction. Bill felt deep satisfaction reading these words. His experience was living on, protecting new generations of soldiers. More letters followed. We rescued 8 hostages last week. Sir, your protocol for urban rescue operations worked perfectly. Everyone came home. Lost Rodriguez in an IED attack yesterday. Your words about honoring the fallen by saving the living are keeping me focused on the mission. That last letter worried Bill. He recognized the signs of a leader struggling with casualty guilt, the same burden he'd carried for decades. He wrote back immediately. Marcus Rodriguez's death isn't your failure. Honor his sacrifice by learning from every mission, by bringing others home safely. Leadership means carrying the weight of loss while maintaining the clarity to save lives. Grief is the price we pay for caring. Don't let it cloud your judgment or paralyze your decisions. 6 months later, Marcus returned from deployment, but he was different, quieter, more serious, carrying the invisible weight that all combat veterans recognize. They met in the park at the usual time, same place, but everything felt different. Welcome home, son. Thank you, sir. Marcus's voice was flat, distant. I understand now why you run here every morning. Why is that? Because routine saves us. Normalcy after chaos. Something you can control when everything else feels random. Bill saw himself in Marcus, the young officer learning the hardest lessons of military service, discovering that coming home was often harder than being deployed. How are you adjusting? It's difficult, sir. Civilian concerns feel trivial. After what we saw over there, traffic jams, office politics, people complaining about minor inconveniences, it's hard to relate. That disconnection is normal. Marcus, but remember, protecting the right to worry about trivial things is what makes our service worthwhile. Those civilians you rescued, they're home, worrying about normal problems because you kept them alive. I lost 3 men, sir. Rodriguez, Martinez, and Chen. Good soldiers, all of them. Bill stopped running. Tell me about them. For the next hour, Marcus shared stories about the soldiers he'd lost. Bill listened without judgment, offering perspective when asked, but mostly just bearing witness to grief that only another combat leader could understand. Sir, how do you live with the knowledge that your decisions got good people killed? You learn to carry it, Marcus. You honor their memory by being worthy of their sacrifice. You become the kind of leader they would have trusted, the kind of man they would have respected. Word of Bill's informal mentorship began spreading through the military community. Young officers heard about the legendary colonel who trained future leaders during morning runs in Central Park. Sir, this is Lieutenant Sarah Chen, Marine Corps, Lieutenant David Kim, Navy SEALs, Captain Jason Miller, Army Special Forces. What started as two men running became an informal academy. Bill found himself counseling officers preparing for deployment, struggling with command decisions, or dealing with the aftermath of combat. Colonel, how do you maintain hope in hopeless situations? You focus on what you can control. Your training, your preparation, your decisions. Hope isn't a feeling, it's a choice to keep acting constructively, even when outcomes are uncertain. How do you balance mission objectives with soldier welfare? The mission matters, but your people matter more. A successful mission that destroys your team isn't actually successful. Sometimes the courage to abort a mission is greater than the courage to complete it. These morning sessions became legendary among young officers. They called it the Colonel's University, advanced leadership education that couldn't be found in any classroom. The informal training sessions eventually caught the attention of higher command. One morning, a black sedan waited at the park entrance. Colonel Harrison. That's me, General Patricia Webb, Pentagon. May I speak with you privately? Bill was surprised but agreed. They walked to a quiet bench overlooking the lake. Colonel, we've been hearing remarkable reports about your informal leadership development work. Young officers speaking about life-changing mentorship, tactical innovations, leadership principles that are making real differences in the field. I'm just sharing experience. General, we'd like to formalize this. Offer you a consulting position with Special Operations Command. Help us develop the next generation of military leaders. Bill considered the offer carefully. I appreciate the recognition, but I prefer the informal approach. Why? Because real learning happens through relationship, not curriculum. These young people need mentors, not more instructors. They need someone who's been where they're going, not someone reading from a textbook. General Webb studied him carefully. You're turning down a significant opportunity here, Colonel. General, I've had my career. This is about their careers. Now, the moment you formalize this, you change the dynamic. Bureaucracy kills authenticity. Though Bill declined formal appointment, General Webb asked for one favor. Would you consider speaking at the annual Special Operations Leadership Conference? Share your philosophy with senior commanders. Bill agreed to this one-time appearance. His speech was simple but powerful. Leadership isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being willing to make hard decisions when lives are on the line. It's about accepting responsibility for outcomes, good and bad. It's about understanding that your soldiers' lives matter more than your career. He paused, looking out at hundreds of experienced military leaders. Real leadership is measured not by the battles you win, but by the people you bring home. Not by the promotions you earn, but by the leaders you develop. Not by the recognition you receive, but by the difference you make when no one is watching. The speech received a standing ovation and was later required viewing for all special operations officers. But Bill never spoke publicly again, preferring the quiet influence of morning conversations. Years later, Marcus returned as Major Thompson, now commanding his own unit and preparing for a senior leadership role. Sir, I wanted to thank you personally. Your mentorship shaped everything about how I lead. How so? 3 deployments, as a commander. 0 casualties under my direct command. I used every principle you taught me. This was the greatest honor Bill could receive, knowing his wisdom had kept young soldiers alive. What's next for you, Marcus? I'm being assigned to train new officers at Ranger School. I want to institutionalize what you taught me. The mentorship approach. Yes, sir. Real conversations about real leadership challenges. Practical wisdom from someone who's been there. I want to create a program that captures what you do here. Bill smiled. Then the tradition continues. But remember, it's not about the program. It's about caring enough to invest in individual people. I understand, sir, one conversation at a time. Marcus's formal leadership development program became hugely successful, but he never forgot the source of his wisdom. Every year, he brought his most promising students to meet Bill in the park. Colonel, meet the next generation. Bill would spend morning runs with these young officers, sharing the same hard-earned lessons, asking the same challenging questions, providing the same honest perspective that had shaped Marcus. Sir, what's the most important quality in a military leader? Intellectual honesty. The courage to see situations clearly, even when the truth is uncomfortable. Most military disasters happen because someone couldn't admit what they were really Facing how do you develop that kind of honesty? By practicing it in small decisions first. By surrounding yourself with people who will tell you the truth. By remembering that your ego is less important than your soldiers' lives. Bill's influence spread far beyond individual mentorship. Officers he'd counseled went on to command positions, carrying his principles into their own leadership styles. His approach to tactical innovation was studied at military academies. His philosophy of ethical leadership influenced policy discussions, but he remained focused on individual relationships. One morning run at a time. Colonel, I'm deploying to Syria next month. Any advice? Remember that every decision you make affects real people with families who love them. Let that weight guide your judgment, but don't let it paralyze your action. How do you balance risk and mission accomplishment? You calculate risks honestly, prepare thoroughly, and then accept that some uncertainty will always remain. Leadership is acting decisively despite incomplete information. These conversations continued for years, touching hundreds of military careers, shaping tactical doctrine, and preserving hard-won wisdom for future generations. Bill continued his morning runs until he was 75, even after his pace slowed and distance shortened. He maintained the routine that had become sacred to so many young officers. The park became hallowed ground for military personnel, a place where experience met youth, where wisdom was transferred, where the weight of command was shared and understood. When Bill could no longer run, he walked the same route, still greeting young officers, still sharing insights, still serving his country through the quiet influence of personal relationship. Marcus, now a full colonel himself, organized a final tribute. Sir, you've shaped more military leaders than any formal program ever could. Your influence will continue for generations. Marcus, that was never the goal. The goal was just to help good people become better leaders. You succeeded, sir, beyond measure. For 15 years he ran in the same park, at the same time, no matter the weather, no matter the season. What appeared to be simple routine was actually profound service, a daily commitment to develop leaders, share wisdom, and protect the protectors. That morning, when the young soldier greeted him, the old man responded with a military salute. From that moment, careers were shaped, lives were saved, and a legacy was established that would outlast any formal program or institutional initiative. Colonel William Harrison never stopped serving his country. He just changed uniforms, from military dress to running gear, from formal command to informal mentorship, from leading soldiers in combat to developing leaders for the future. The man who walked in the park wasn't just exercising his body. He was exercising his values, his commitment, his responsibility to the next generation of warriors, who would carry forward the traditions he had helped establish. Some heroes retire from active duty, others simply find new ways to serve. Now I ask you, have you ever encountered someone whose simple daily routine concealed extraordinary purpose? Someone whose quiet influence shaped lives in ways that formal programs never could? Share their story in the comments, because here at Human Stories, we believe the most powerful leadership often happens in the most unexpected places, one conversation at a time. If this story touched you, like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe. Until we meet in the next story, and remember, the most important missions often happen after the uniform comes off, when real influence begins.